Welcome back to Mindshift with Luca and Jonty. This is episode 12, and tonight we're going to be doing a strategy session. We'll be looking at a company and analyzing their business strategy, discussing how their business model works, and then giving a bit of our opinions afterwards and how we think if we were in the position of the managing director or CEO, how we would operate or make decisions for the company. So yeah, tonight we're actually going to be talking about Spotify, which we're really excited about. And obviously we in the podcasting space, so we think there's a link to what we do as well. But Luca, why don't you take over and set us up for tonight?
No, Jonty, this is super cool to be doing this because this is something we've been chatting about for quite a while. Hey? I think this is something, depending on how we feel after this, I think we're going to be feeling good because this is something we are definitely passionate about being in the business, and this is a business podcast as well. So I think this is quite exciting. It's sort of a cool theme to go on from now on. Strategy sessions. Maybe we'll break down a couple of other cool companies in the future. But yeah, I mean, what a better way to start off on a company like Spotify, because we don't work, obviously we don't work for Spotify, but we rely on Spotify, and we produce this podcast through Anchor, which is a subsidiary of Spotify. So it's just quite funny. We're going to go a bit meta in this one. Before we do dive into everything, I want to say a disclaimer. In this episode, we'll purely be discussing Spotify's business model and strategy, and we won't be talking about anything to do with investing with in the company or any investment metrics, and that anything we say in this episode is our own opinion and not anyone else's. So, Jonty, to start us off, do you want to describe who Spotify is? Who is Spotify? For anyone that doesn't know.
For anyone who doesn't know, which I'll be surprised if people don't know, Spotify is a music streaming platform in essence. It offers, actually a free business model to those who want to use it with ad-based. Obviously, it has ads if you use the free service, but then also offers premium subscription-based services where you can access their content without any adverts interrupting your sessions.
The freemium model, as we learned in uni, hey?
Back in Strat, exactly. Which is actually a great business model, something we can analyze, because I think it gives people a taste of the product before they actually decide to go into the premium based model, which in fact is how Spotify has been so successful. That most of their premium subscribers, if actually all of them, come from generally the ad based. Okay, not all of them, but most of them come from the ad-based model first. I think it's something like a 75% turnover rate, but don't quote me on that. But I know it's high.
It's more like 45%.
Okay, there we go.
Subscriber to monthly active user to paid subscriber. Their ratio is 45%, which I was actually looking today. I saw today that like an industry norm in the subscription business is more like 5%. So, which is actually insane when you think about like that their numbers, and this is a rabbit hole, which is quite cool to dive in straight away, is that if you actually look at the history of the music subscription industry, Spotify was basically one of the earliest companies to start with this freemium model. Obviously, Apple Music came a bit later to the game. Amazon Music also only really surfacing now. I think it might have been started quite early, but obviously only gaining a bit of traction in recent years. But basically, from my understanding, was that Spotify was one of the only music streaming companies to offer a freemium model, where like Apple Music or Amazon would force people or give people a very short free trial and then force them to subscribe to carry on using. Whereas Spotify, I found it so interesting actually when I was listening to Daniel Ek, the CEO, which we have to talk about more because I think Daniel Ek is seriously impressive, and I think he's a big reason why this company is going to succeed in the long term and why it's been so good from a strategic standpoint. But basically, it's so interesting with Spotify's platform because they actually allow you to chop and change continuously between a paid and a free membership. So I can right now, I'm a Spotify user, a monthly paid subscriber. I can go right now, cancel my membership, become a free member, and then in a week's time, sign back up to the monthly paid service. And that's a great way for people to just give people flexibility, convenience, and
But
just playing into the mind of the customer. You know what I mean?
I want to jump in there. I just want to say, but I think, like they do offer that ability to do that. But I think what's so cool about their premium service, it's really sticky. So once I think also the statistics, I'm not going to quote it again because I'll get it wrong again, but I know they have a really high retention rate in their premium subscriber base. And, from using the service, I changed from Apple Music to Spotify this year, and I'm so glad I made the change. It was quite a mission, like changing all my playlists and everything, but it was so worth it. But the premiums, obviously it allows you to download the music onto your phone as well, which you can't do on the free ad-based version. And then also not having the ads annoying you is really beneficial. But what I really wanted to say about the premium service is, or about Spotify more specifically, is that their algorithm is just next level. And I think if you had to ask me what's their competitive advantage over Apple Music and all the other competitors, it's that algorithm. Because ever since I've joined Spotify, like the recommendations of my music it's improved dramatically. My playlists are so much better than they used to be on Apple Music because I'm actually getting really good recommendations. Like most of the songs they recommend are generally songs I like. And so I think, we've spoken about, we had an AI episode and machine learning, and I think their machine learning gives them that competitive edge because whatever they're doing and the data they're collecting works really well. And I don't know if you've had that same effect.
Definitely. I think we can spend a bit of time onto this now because I think it was sort of a natural segue. Because obviously now we are both users of the platform, so it's quite fundamental. If we just step back from a strategic framework sort of angle in saying that a pinnacle part of your strategy is a focus on your customer, right? What is the service that Spotify is offering? It's instant music streaming and a huge catalog of content on a seamless, easy to use, very convenient application. Fundamental to that, right, to that customer experience if you map it, it's how people's experience on their app. And as you've just said, Jonty, it's extremely sticky. It is such a good platform. And from my experience, I've never subscribed to Apple Music or any other music service besides Spotify. But basically for me and Kerry, my girlfriend, me and her, we've gone in on with Spotify on their duo membership where you can have one account with two profiles, which is actually really cool. Well, yeah, it's like the family
vibe.
Kind of like the family, but it's for couples. So, which is actually it's actually amazing. So if you are, they've like, they've catered for every sort of person that would want to use their service, which is also really cool from a strategic.
This is why I need a girlfriend, bro, so I can save costs to Spotify, bro.
100%. It's a bit higher because
what do they charge you?
So it's like £13.99 for in total. But obviously per person, it comes out as less because it's $9.99 individual for an individual.
This is actually interesting what you bring up, right? Because the pricing in different geography or locations around the world.
It's the same.
Is it the same? Because
yeah, it is.
So what's in pounds? What's the amount for just a single subscription?
So pounds is $9.99 for an individual plan. And then in dollars, it's the same. So it's also $9.99 per month. So it's also the same.
But I'm pretty sure I pay 60 Rand a month, eh?
Yeah, but then what's that in dollars? But there might be pricing. Because obviously maybe they see that the UK and US market is maybe similar.
So that's what I was saying, is that they might charge different rates around the world.
Okay.
Which I don't want to, yeah, like, it sounds definitely, because if you're
Interesting.
paying,
Interesting.
I mean, what's that? 160, 170 Rand for a single subscription in the UK. But yeah, it's 60 Rand. And Apple Music charges 60 Rand here as well.
That's interesting. So they obviously have some sort of dynamic pricing. No, that's very interesting. So I think obviously what they've done is they must have done some sort of, what do you think? They must have done some sort of like customer
It's
analysis or
like price
demographic.
discrimination,
Yeah,
isn't
price
it?
discrimination.
For,
And obviously they've looked at
yeah.
like maybe median income between the different areas and said, okay, maybe the average UK or US user is probably has a bit more disposable income. So we can maybe bump up the price a tiny bit.
Mm.
And then obviously for somewhere in South Africa where there's a big currency discrepancy, maybe they've been like, okay, cool, we
What's
can
like
just
the Big Mac index? Maybe they've,
that too,
gone on a
that
similar
too,
index like that.
that too. Anyway, let's jump back because I want to still talk about the user experience, right? So,
Yeah.
I noticed I've had a great experience. So obviously I have no previous experience with another music subscription service before
Mm.
Spotify. But obviously my girlfriend did, Kerry. She loves Spotify. I haven't heard one single complaint that Spotify doesn't have something that Apple Music had, or that Apple Music was better in this circumstance. There's been next to nothing, which is actually an amazing thing.
Yeah. I mean, I just think the whole user experience is way better. So
Mm.
the look and the feel for me is just
Yeah,
better. I mean, then the algorithm, like I said, that's the game changer. But it's interesting. I've
100%.
chatted to a lot of people, right? And like so I made the move, and I was so obsessed with Spotify, and I was like, yo, this is amazing. It's game changing. And then you'll chat to people and they'll be like, like, I don't really care. Like, I've used both, but in my opinion, it doesn't matter. And Apple Music's just convenient. And that's the thing, is also what I found out this year is, like, an Apple Watch, you can only download the music on an Apple Watch if you have the Apple Music. And if you have Spotify, you can only download it onto a Garmin. You can't download. So, which is
Okay.
annoying, especially since I've started running and trail running, whatever. It's interesting that, those kind of things, and that can, like, persuade
Yeah.
consumers to
Yeah.
choose a different streaming service.
But it's obviously just small little battles that each sort of entity or each company, which are direct competitors in the music space,
Yeah.
it's these little games that they're playing to sort of like persuade. And like, I mean, all Apple's trying to do is that if you are in their ecosystem, they're going to try persuade you to get Apple Music, and they're going to try and make it as tough as possible for people to use Spotify on their platform. Obviously, you're going to be able to use their mobile app or something, but something like that, if you're a runner and
Mm.
you want to have offline music when you're running, you can only download onto an Apple Watch from Apple Music, which is like a funny,
Yeah.
a funny little thing. But and it's interesting talking about the user experience, because if you take a look at, I've just got it up next to me, Spotify's acquisitions from when they, from their early days. A lot of, I'm not going to jump too much into, because I don't know much of these, and they're quite like small. I think they were very small acquisitions when they were still private,
Yeah.
before they IPO'd in 2018. But you can see what they're sort of building, right? So in May 2013, you have acquired a music discovery app. In March 2014, acquired a music intelligence company, data science consulting firm, social and messaging startups, audio detection, machine learning. So they've made all these little, from a strategic standpoint, trying to relate to as
Mm.
much to a framework as possible. What they've done is they've said, okay, cool. This is the platform that I want to create. This is what I need. It's going to take me much longer to set this up in-house or organically. So let me go out into the marketplace, find a company that's doing this already, doing it well, and let's just absorb them and, let them fit into Spotify and do what they were doing to make our platform a beast. And in my opinion, like all these, because as soon as I was looking at this list, I was like, okay, makes sense. What they've done is they've literally just like manufactured their their algorithm and their technology by doing small little bolt-on acquisitions for the things that they need. So
it's an
which can be
interesting
very
strategy.
important. With all those strategic acquisitions, they've created this beast algorithm that's literally differentiated them completely from all the other streaming services. Every single person, Jonty, I've chatted to, and like you were saying, as well, I'm sure you've chatted to a couple of people who just say that like the recommendations and the experience of Spotify is second to none compared to the other platforms, right? And this has been what's caused them to have, you know, $5-6 billion, 5-6 billion euros of revenue, growing steadily year on year. And then they've had the permission to sort of diversify into other areas, which we will come back to. But what I quickly wanted to touch on is that a complication and maybe a risk, which we'll probably bring up towards the end to close off, is that I'm sure you saw that their cost of their service delivery, obviously with the music, with delivering music, they have to pay royalties to artists, record labels who they've got licensing deals with to have the artist's content on their platform, which is a huge complication in their system.
Can I jump in here? So
go for it.
There are a couple of things I find interesting, right? So you speak of their large revenue line, okay, but of course we know they're still loss making at the moment, which is interesting. And you know, obviously their strategy is to grow and scale the business so that they can eventually become profitable, right? But what's interesting is I was looking at how the licensing agreements work with so firstly, what's interesting with the record labels, there's the big 3 or 4 that supply them. So it's Universal Music, Sony Music, Warner Music, and Merlin, which actually make up 82% of the music streamed on their platform. And so also, if you think about it, like in the Porter's 5 Forces model framework that you can use to kind of break down how everything impacts this business, the bargaining power of the suppliers is really high.
It's huge. It's huge.
You know, because you know they own all the music, and even though Spotify is, you know, really large, like it's a very competitive space that they operate in. So I think the bargaining power lies quite heavily with the suppliers, which makes, you know, it difficult for Spotify to actually make a profit. And what's interesting is how they pay these record labels. So they have like a minimum fee sometimes for some of the labels. So they have to pay out that fee. So even if they don't get or increase, you know, their monthly active users, that's obviously a risk for them because they still have these minimum fees. But then on top of that, their fee is based off number of monthly active users, you know, the ratio of premium subscribers to ad-based users. There's a whole various metrics that it's based off. And so it's not only a fixed fee, which is interesting. And then on top of that, they also have to pay out some of the music artists, if I'm not correct, or is that?
Yeah, it actually becomes quite complex, because I was also looking at this. I was trying to make sense of it.
System.
You maybe are more up to scratch than I am, but basically when I was listening to things and when I think it just got simplified through everything that I was watching, is that they said that I heard that basically 70% of their revenue ends up getting paid to the record labels, either through whatever arrangements you were saying earlier. But basically then I thought, okay, but they're not making revenue per stream. They're making revenue from ads. Obviously the ads may be per stream, but then the other revenues from the premium subscription, which is obviously fixed per month, right? So per
some of the payments
paying out. So yeah, go on.
Some of the payments are also based on their revenue numbers.
Okay.
So it's all negotiated, right?
Yeah, but I mean, a complex.
You know,
it's a complex point for their business model, because obviously these huge record labels who have been in business, you know, they are notoriously the gatekeepers to the music industry, right? And they you know, in my view of it, they by proxy they own the artists. I mean, they control their branding, their PR, they own the music, right? And I mean, there was recently there was that whole thing with Taylor Swift's old album that got sold by Scooter Braun, and then like a year later it got sold again, and like Taylor Swift just didn't know anything about this. I don't know if you read anything about that, but basically, like, I just find it quite funny that the artists are almost like a completely separate entity, and they've almost signed, they've signed complete ownership over to the record label of their music. So these guys can do whatever they want. So it becomes a bit complex. But that was Spotify's cost to entry, hey? Cost of entry to the whole industry is when they started, they knew the only way we're going to build up a good enough content catalog of content to attract subscribers and retain people on our platform is if we have to give everything to these record labels, because they're the gatekeepers. They own all the music. So we have to get licensing deals, and, you know, just play into their hands, because you have to. And we're definitely going to discuss, because this is a good segue later into how Spotify can move away from the record labels as they grow and get more leverage, because they are building a monster platform. And they essentially
before we get there.
But before, sorry, I'm getting excited. I'm getting too excited.
We're getting excited. I know why you're excited. But I wanted to just, so obviously there's also the risk that these license agreements aren't renewed.
Yes.
Because at any point they could lose those license agreements. So that's also a risk. But, you know, I was thinking about, because to make the platform beneficial, right, they obviously have to have a large range of content, right? And they obviously give access to the consumers at a low price, which is their value proposition, which is most of these streaming companies' value proposition. But my thinking is, you know, the industry is becoming quite competitive now. There's a large list of competitors that are coming in. But, you know, I would imagine it's actually it has high barriers to entry, I would imagine, because to get that large array of content, you know, is obviously extremely expensive. Not everyone can just, you know, go and invest in that kind of capital and get that, you know, have that ability to offer such a big service. But it's interesting to see it's actually becoming a very competitive space. But then you look at the competitors, and it's like, obviously Alphabet through Google, and Google Play Music and YouTube Music as well as Amazon. And then you realize why there's
well, of course, it makes sense.
Be competitors. Yeah,
it makes sense because obviously it's Spotify who's been, you know, has become a big name, right? Over 12 years or 14 years now of being in existence. But when you actually look at the landscape, they, like, I got a funny feeling, because I looked at it, I was like, okay, this one name, they are small in comparison to Apple, Amazon, Google, Tencent, because Tencent but has a share of what, like 11% of the music streaming market, if I'm correct. Could be wrong on that, but
so it depends if you're including China or not, eh?
I'm not entirely sure though. I saw 11%.
Then I know
I saw
NetEase and Tencent are the big competitors in China. But obviously, okay. I don't think Spotify or Apple Music. I'm not sure about Apple Music. I don't think they operate in China. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, well, maybe it was aggregated globally. Anyway, my point is that, like, where you realize that Spotify is almost a bit out of place in the fact that, like, the whole music streaming industry, aside from them, funny enough that they have the leading market share out of all of those, is all big tech companies. You know, the big tech companies aside from Facebook. So it just shows you, like, the high cost of entry and the value that Spotify has gotten over the past few years from being early in the game. And, you know, and speaking of being early in the game as well, it's worth noting that from what they've done very well, and this is not really a strategic framework that I want to bring in, but more a sort of fundamental law of marketing. Remember that book? If you listened to last week's episode, John, do you remember the law of marketing book? The first law the first and most important law is the law of firsts, right? If you are first in a category or in an industry, you should, bar any catastrophe or disaster, you should hold the number one market share. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other laws that come after that. But basically, the whole premise of this law is that the first brand name, the first company, the first competitor to get their name in the mind of the consumer or the user wins. And I think that's what Spotify has done. And I think that's huge for, you know, from their perspective, is having built that brand name. They actually have an insanely strong brand. You think of them on the level of Apple or Amazon or Google. But if you look at just the size of each of those companies, Spotify is tiny compared to all of them, right? But it's just they have the brand pool. If you say to anyone on the street, who comes to mind first when you think of music streaming? Like 9 times out of 10, I bet you they'll say Spotify. So they have that place. They have that place in the mind of the consumer, which has been fundamental to their strategy and winning in this game.
And also what's interesting is they only focus on music streaming, and now podcasting, but that's their primary focus, which I think also maybe can give them the edge in the sense that they focus on doing one thing really well.
Completely, Jonty. This is so important. It's so important. And like, it's so funny that you actually say that, because it's another law of marketing, the law of focus. Literally, the law of focus states that you need to do one thing insanely well, and anything else you extend into, they say, it's not really, it's been disproven by other companies that have expanded into other spaces and kept the same brand name. But under those laws of marketing, they say, if you extend your line of offering, you should change your brand name. But like, anyway, but basically, it's quite an interesting point. But anyway, it's so interesting that you say that. And because Spotify has ultimate focus, be it not albeit on music, but like on audio in general. And I think we're going to go into that on.
What I wanted to speak about a little bit was how they make their revenue, right? So obviously premium subscribers and then ad-based users. And just on the ad-based users, what I thought was quite interesting, which I hadn't thought about until I was doing some research, was they're essentially competing for the share of advertisers' wallet. And remember, the share of the advertisers' wallet's going to Facebook, it's going to YouTube, it's going to a lot of large companies, right? I mean, even Amazon and all of those companies. So they're in quite a competitive market to get ad revenue on their system, because there's a large array of competitors that the companies can choose to market through. So I thought that was interesting. But ad-based revenue only makes up 10% of their revenue number.
Yes.
Premium makes up 90%. So obviously growth in their premium subscribers is key for the business to perform well. And they've actually been growing their monthly active users by about 30% over the last few years, which is insane numbers, which goes back to the whole point on they need scale to become profitable.
I mean, also my point on that was with having only 10% of revenue come from ads, right? Doesn't that scream at you and say like growth opportunity? For me, that was like, okay, surely that's more of an opportunity to expand that and maybe like take reliance off. But I don't know, maybe now that I'm articulating that idea, it's a bit flawed, because what's the is a more reliable source of revenue your subscribers, right?
Yeah, like, I think your average revenue per user is much higher on your premium subscribers.
Okay, versus ads.
So you would obviously firstly want to grow premium subscribers, but as we spoke about earlier, your gateway to premium subscribers is the ad-based users. But you also want to monetize your ad-based platform. So I mean, there could be room to grow there, and obviously maybe over time they can find and innovate ways to subtly get advertising across, or make the platform more profitable, the ad-based platform profitable without deterring users.
And Jonty, it's also interesting, because another point I wanted to make on like leading on from this is that in the future, with the with the sort of incoming wave of smart speakers, smart devices, audio first, right? And I believe that Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, is onto something in that he's riding a wave of audio that is still coming. And if you look at the rise of Amazon's Echo, Apple HomePod, Google Assistant, which is still not yet widely adopted by most people. I mean, like, you can't say that like everyone, like whatever the statistic is for however many people in the US have smartphones, which is like a massive penetration, is like 90+% or something, right? Penetration, smartphone penetration. You can't say the same for smart speakers yet. And that's a growing wave. So my thought was that with the rise of audio, there's, as soon as that space becomes more established and people are waking up in the morning to their Google Assistant speaking to them, and setting alarms through their Google Assistants, switching on the lights, boiling the kettle. Like, now we're talking 10, 20 years time, when all of this stuff is super sophisticated, like smart home, smart car. With that, with more users in that space, with more ears in that space, more advertisers want to come and market to people who are listening through those. So that was more, I was saying, is that maybe it's not more of Spotify growing their sort of ad revenue, but it's their ad revenue growing organically. Something like maybe it's more of like a YouTube or Facebook story where, like, or Google, even through their ad revenue, it just grew as with the number of users, and as they had this massive influx of users when their platforms became established, their ad revenue skyrocketed. So with the advent of audio first, because obviously everything's becoming, and this is probably meant for later when we talk about the growth opportunities, is a huge opportunity for Spotify, is that with the advent of audio first, people needing things faster, the quickness of information that's just going to come through straight into my ear, from my Apple HomePod, then an increase in the ad rate. I know I've like gone around it quite a like long route, but
this is cool. I think this is a good segment, because I want to start speaking about the podcast now, because I think that's we're quite excited. Obviously, the link to what we do, but also, a couple of years ago, I listened to, I saw it on YouTube, Gary V. Gary V. I think you introduced me to him because you always used to share his. He was speaking on.
I'm a fan. I'm a small fan.
Yeah, he was speaking on, social media, and then he mentioned podcasting. He said how, the podcasting is the future. This was like quite a few years ago, and I remember just being skeptical and saying, no, podcasting's so lame. Like, I don't see a future in that. And a couple of years down the line, and I could not agree with the man more. Like, he was so off it, like, early, because, I mean, if I think about podcasting now, so I'm someone who, after a long day of work or whatever, I don't like to go sit and read. I want to listen to something. Or if I'm in the car, I want to listen to something. I don't want to read it. So podcasting is huge. And I think our generation, especially a generation where, I don't know, I think we are big on, with the instant gratification generation. In a way, podcasting is a way of getting someone to just tell you something instead of reading it, right? It's easier. I'm not saying you're lazy, but it is an easier way to absorb information.
There's less friction in the whole process. And it's also obviously and like you're saying, in our generation, we in the age and generation of fractured attention spans, where people are doing 40 things at once. So you cooking breakfast, and you listening to your podcast, and you talking to your spouse, and you're doing this, and you're doing that, and your headphones or your AirPods are in your ear, and you're listening to a quick podcast. And it's so interesting as well. If I think of like how I got into podcasts, it was as well like at gym, in the car, just filling your free time with something. And we now in an age of content. We're now in an age of content consumption. So it's what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, like when you gym, when I go for a run,
Yeah.
you can listen to a podcast, and that's time that you're saving, because you can't read while you're exercising or gymming or whatever, but you can listen to a podcast. So that's time that you can save, or get kill two birds with one stone.
But
So,
dude, you
but
know,
what's interesting?
Ty Lopez. Do you know Ty Lopez? He's also like a Gary V type. He's one of those like social media marketers. He always used to do those like those spammy ads with like the Lamborghini and the garage and the books and stuff like that. I don't know if you ever saw any of his ads on Facebook.
I don't know. I would probably recognize him maybe,
Yeah,
but
you would
I
recognize
can't.
him. He has glasses. He's like, yeah, anyway. So Ty Lopez, he was big on that. Like also very early, like 2015, 2016. He was like, yo, when you go to gym or when you're working out, when you're exercising, when you're doing something where you can multitask, listen to an audiobook, listen to a podcast and like learn stuff. And I remember hearing that. I was like, what? Like, why would I do that? Why would I want to be listening to a book or a podcast while I'm working out or something? But it happened, and I do it now. So it's one of the it's like we witnessing the growth of this industry, right? And like to pull out those statistics, it's a $10 billion industry as of end of 2019 or 2020. And Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, who's obviously gone insane, who's insanely bullish on podcasts, as we're going to discuss right now, he said that it's going to be $100 billion industry in the next 10, 20 years. And that's 10x. That means more podcasts are coming out. That means more people listening,
So bringing it back to Spotify, their strategy is to be, the one-stop shop, or the main podcast supplier or
platform.
When you think of
it's a platform game.
When you think of podcasts, you think of Spotify. So that's their strategy. And then, as we were speaking about earlier, they've gone into a whole bunch of acquisitions to get this moving, right? And so we listed a few of, it was like Gimlet, Parcast.
Yeah. So Gimlet, Parcast are your
Anchor.
two podcast production and like broadcast networks. So they basically sort of produce I could be slightly off on this, but they're more on the production side and networking side of podcasts, where I think Gimlet has produced like non-fiction podcasts and all of that stuff, whereas Anchor is more a tool for creators, allowing people like me and Jonty to create a podcast without the hassle that earlier creators would have to go to, like, even like from a software standpoint, uploading and generating an RSS feed and doing all the nitty gritties that comes with creating a podcast. All I have to do is click a few buttons, type in the name, put in a logo, and Anchor does all the distribution for me, which is super easy. And if you think of that, and if you think from Spotify's sense, from a strategic standpoint in the podcasting space, what they've done is they're almost creating a monopoly in the podcast space, where they are going to have a platform in the future where they are going to be able to sell ads to all their new podcast listeners, where they are going to be able to give people tools to create podcasts, like basically exclusively on their platform. They are going to create their own original content, like we've seen with the getting deals with Kim Kardashian, getting a deal done with DC Comics to create original content for podcast content, with Joe Rogan. Obviously, Joe Rogan is the biggest, but that's obviously not a Spotify. That's not a Spotify original. That's just a licensing deal. But Joe Rogan's a massive one. Can we just talk about that in a second? And the last thing was having a really top class, top quality podcast player platform that is super big and super easy to use for users. And, if you have Spotify, think of how your experience listening to podcasts, it's super easy. And it's all a big network that's easy to navigate. So talking about Joe Rogan, and the whole sphere what they're creating with original content, the biggest, probably the biggest aspect of what they've done in the podcast space is they are commanding it through these tactical acquisitions. Signing a $100 million licensing deal with Joe Rogan. What happened with that was he came online on the Spotify platform from the 1st of September of this year, but still his content was still coming out on YouTube as well. I think from the 1st of December, literally yesterday, or 1st of Jan, his content is only going to be exclusive to Spotify. What that means is you won't be able to see any of his content anywhere else other than Spotify. His whole library of 1,500 episodes before his latest one, right? What that means is...
And you have to be a premium subscriber, right? Which is
No, you don't actually, because you can listen to podcasts free. You see, this is also another sneaky thing they've done with Spotify. If you want to listen to music, you have like limited functionality. You can't download music, you can't shuffle, or you can't choose your own music. And obviously you get the ad breaks. With podcasting, it's free. You can listen to as many podcasts as you want on the Spotify platform without being a paying subscriber. So now what they've done, and this is why the Joe Rogan thing is so clever, is because if you are a diehard Joe Rogan fan, but you don't subscribe to Spotify, you have to download Spotify's app to get access to Joe Rogan. And then you are able to watch all those episodes for free, right? But what it's doing is it's getting more users to the platform.
Marketing.
It's free marketing. And what I saw as well recently with Joe Rogan's like Instagram posts and his YouTube, I don't think his YouTube videos, but like his Instagram posts or clips of the podcast, at the end, there's always a clip that says, my podcast is moving to Spotify from the 1st of December, exclusive. It's like free marketing. And you know how big his platform is. He gets, like 200 million podcast downloads per month. Think about how massive, like 200 million downloads per month, which is massive.
So it's going to bring way more users to the Spotify platform, and then hopefully from that, as we've been discussing,
and they can convert.
Then they convert from there, into premium subscribers.
And obviously, so while we're talking about Joe Rogan, Jonty, I'm sure you've been following in the news. I'm sure you saw a few articles. I think we did discuss about it in a previous episode, where about Joe Rogan, there was a bit of controversy with Spotify employees not being too happy with him, wanting to censor him, because he does have some controversial episodes. Like he has that episode with, he has a few episodes with Alex Jones, who is a super controversial, like almost conspiracy theorist, who's super like left field. I think that he's been banned on Twitter, Facebook, all the big social media platforms for just spreading disinformation and misinformation. Sorry. And then, I mean, what was it, like a month or so after Joe Rogan came onto the platform, he does an episode with Alex Jones for like 4 hours. So he's super controversial in that way. But I think what's happened was there was a bit of maybe uproar from people, from the Spotify employees. But from what I observed, what was coming from Daniel Ek, the CEO, is he was continuously downplaying it, because I think he realizes no matter how controversial Joe Rogan is, I think he realizes the power of his platform, and he realizes the long-term value that Joe Rogan will bring to their platform.
Yeah. And I think it's a great strategy, as you know, it's definitely going to bring in a lot of users. And so I think, just going back to that exclusivity, I think that's what's key to their strategy, which we're going to see going forward. And they're probably going to bring on a lot more big names as well.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, they've done the Michelle Obama original podcast. They've done Kim Kardashian, a deal with Kim Kardashian, DC Comics. And just you wait until a couple of other like big names start signing with them, or they start doing, maybe also another opportunity in the podcasting space. And this leads into like signing exclusive deals is, I watched an interview with the Gimlet head of content. obviously they have a big sort of influence on the podcasts that are coming out of Spotify and the podcasting programming. What they were talking about is that there's a big opportunity on Spotify that they've seen on the platform or in podcasting in general for short form podcasting, that short form podcasting, like 15 to 30 minutes episodes, which obviously we've sort of like in that, like what we're doing, we jump between longer form. Yeah, Mind Shuffle. Check it out, episode 11. And then also
shameless plug there. Hey.
Fiction podcasts as well. So what they're looking at is opportunities in there were 3. What they're looking at is opportunities in fiction, short form programming, and sort of like an interview talk show. Do you know that old talk show or called 60 Minutes? Sorry, investigative journalism podcasting. So something like that, like a 60-minute sort of vibe. Those are the areas that they're looking to grow in. So I wouldn't be surprised to see in the next few years or even months a couple of Spotify original fiction podcasts, or shorter form news podcasts, or a investigative journalism Spotify original, and then probably a couple of other big names going exclusively to Spotify in a Joe Rogan, Howard Stern-esque sort of move. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a similar move in that. And there's huge growth. I mean, like I think we were talking before the call, there's huge opportunity for growth where only 16% of Spotify's monthly active users actually listen to podcasts. And then an interesting thing that Daniel Ek was saying was that they found that their users who engage in podcasts and listen more to podcasts, actually Spotify have seen that they get twice the engagement from those users. How interesting is that? So from those who listen to podcasts actually engage with the platform double the others, which I found
and then obviously
super fascinating.
The longer they listening on the platform, the more opportunity is to advertise or have adverts
to sell ads exactly.
And
exactly.
I mean, you were saying 16% of the monthly active users listen to podcasts, and that grew 200% last year.
Exactly.
Which is so it's growing. So
it's crazy.
Like we said, where the podcast space is moving, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Who knows? Maybe one day Mindshift will be on there, bro. Exclusive to
Spotify. Well, look, let this be a goal setting or whatever you like, at a marker that we can look back on in 10 years time and see if we achieve that goal. That would be unreal.
Yeah.
Don't you know it'd be good? Because I know we're reaching our time capacity that we allotted for. Let's quickly dive into a bit of like growth opportunities, where we see Spotify going in the next 10 years, competitive advantages, moats they're building, and maybe a few risks. If you want to throw some stuff out, let's just do a bit of a quick fire and dive into some stuff.
Sometimes I like to start with the risks. I think it's a very competitive space, where a lot of competitors are coming in, and I think even we saw I think it was the last quarter that Spotify was losing some market share to Apple Music, or they're losing a bit of market share, and also I think their subscriber growth is slowing down a little bit. So I think risks is, can they keep getting this growth that they've had in the past, and can they maintain their market share? I think there's probably a risk that they might not be able to keep that up.
And what's interesting about that is that I actually saw that Apple Music has more monthly paying subscribers in the US than only in the US, that they have more monthly paying subscribers than Spotify. But where Spotify beats them is globally. So Spotify have their stuff sorted out globally, but in the US, so maybe that's something that could potentially, because if they win the US, which if Apple win the US, which a lot of sort of production and the sort of media we are used to, most of the world is used to consuming, and arguably the biggest market for podcasting. So that could be a big risk risk where maybe Apple has more
Yeah.
leverage over Spotify just by a nature of where they, you know, in the US, that they have actually more dominance.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, another risk I think is, we spoke about it, the license agreements, the ability to renew
Yeah.
that, the price increases, the bargaining power that the record labels have. So that's all uncertain. But what we were saying with the podcast is nice, is how they can create their own content and then they eliminate that risk. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah. And with that, obviously it sort of, it also ties in with the fact that they are still loss making. And the risk with those licensing deals is that they are continuously forced over time to pay out 70% of their revenue to the record labels. And, you know, obviously in the long term, from a strategic point of view, if you can't get your business profitable, then, you know, that's a bit of a problem. So
Yeah.
obviously that's another big risk that is posed to them. But yeah, so then on to growth opportunities, Jonty. I'll start. So
Yeah, I think you're more wax on these questions.
well, I mean, not necessarily. You definitely going to jump off these. So what I found very interesting when I was looking, I saw a graph of where the majority of Spotify's users come from. There were two massive gaps in Africa, not South Africa, in the rest of Africa and Asia. Besides India, well, India is a market they're actually moving into currently, and the rest of Asia, South Korea as well, China, which is huge. Like that's massive growth. And Daniel Ek, the CEO, has looked at Africa and he says that is a $1 billion population potentially. If they can penetrate that, and sort of which I thought of then as another growth opportunity, is if you try get deals done with like the African telco companies, think MTN, where I've seen they do it in the UK as well. Spotify has like a bundle sort of deal with Vodafone, where if you buy a SIM deal or a Wi-Fi deal or some sort of a data deal with the telecommunication company, then Spotify gets bundled in. So imagine they can get on that, like get on an MTN or a Telcom or whatever, who, you know, those telco companies that have penetration in Africa, think like Nigeria, they could literally just cruise into that market, and they just have to sort of pick their moment where they see trends changing and African people becoming more used to consuming audio and using audio for music streaming and podcasting.
And smartphone penetration is quite high in Africa, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Or it's growing. And I mean,
is, and
like we said, the Spotify offers pretty low cost services. And you know, music is a big part of everyone's life all over the world. The question would be, can they, would their music cater to that demographic or that culture, in the sense, you know, would they have to acquire more different content, or how would they acquire that content?
Probably that's a good point. That's a good point. No, well, also that makes me think of, I was reading earlier this year that they could take a book out of Netflix's book, where, you know, obviously Netflix moving, it was actually specifically related to South Africa, where obviously, which is a market that Netflix is also trying to infiltrate, is that what you start doing is you produce content that is native to the region or population user base you want to attract. So, you know, okay, for example, just off the top of my head, for example, Spotify could, this ties in like all my points that I wanted to say, right? You know, in the future, if they become like, if they just take a hold of all their leverage that they are getting as becoming the number one, you know, distribution platform for music, which they are. I mean, and music streaming is the future. And I don't think people are going to switch back to buying CDs or how else did you do it? Like, what was those things called? The vinyls. Yeah. See, you can see that I'm not.
I know what you
not
mean. I can't
not a
think of the
Gen
name
X or whatever. People aren't going to go back to that. People are always going to stick to the internet and streaming. Streaming's here to stay. It's not going away. So what they could do, leverage all of that, be like, we are the kingpin in distribution, and they could look for up and coming stars and music artists that are up and coming in those areas. They could approach in South Africa, probably a bad example because they are in South Africa already. They could say to AKA, hey, let's sign a deal with you. We'll help you produce and distribute all your music and help you with marketing.
And that's what I also wanted to get to that, is at what point do they start producing their own content instead of, it's like Netflix, right? Instead of just procuring all the content, they start actually making the content. And so
exactly.
that could be, And that
from a financial standpoint, that also becomes then a fixed cost. That becomes a fixed cost, not a variable cost, because then you pay once for developing a song that they own, or maybe that they've got a deal with the artist, that they don't have to then pay royalties every single time that song's played. And in my opinion, they already have permission to do that with podcasts.
What's stopping them now? That's what I want to know, is what's stopping them now from doing that? Is it that the record labels have too much leverage, or, what is it that means that they can't go and just bypass the record labels? I think, I would need to do more research in that. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's a question I had as well. It's actually, it's really interesting. Like, I couldn't find anything which sort of elaborated on that. But I'm just thinking that maybe it is too early. And this is also testament to, maybe this is more of Daniel X thinking as the CEO. He's very long-term focused. And what I love about him is that he doesn't view this thing as sort of Spotify wins and the record labels lose, or he doesn't want to destroy record labels. He wants to add value to all parties, like the artists, the record labels, and the end users. So I think there will come a time when they have enough leverage to go out and become their own record label, but maybe not yet. And I think that a lot of artists, if you look at, like, they've had some problems with Taylor Swift pulling her albums off the platform. Adele did the same as well. I think maybe it's a bit too early in that sort of game to go out on your own. And, maybe they're just doubling down on the podcast thing. And like we said earlier, keeping focus. I think that maybe they don't want to spread themselves too thin too soon. So maybe do another decade of brand building.
Those are good points.
Yeah. And focus on the podcasting game and literally become the one-stop shop for podcasting in the next decade. Then from 2030 onwards, they've gained enough leverage. They have literally cemented themselves as the number one distribution platform for music. And then you can start thinking about maybe becoming their own record label.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and just like another idea off the top of my head, obviously this year we've seen the rise of TikTok as a huge social media platform, right?
Yeah, I see they're jumping into the music business now as well.
Yes, well, I mean,
they want to release some music streaming service now.
Really, I actually didn't see that. Is that the parent company, ByteDance, wanting to release this? Or was it
I'm
actually?
not too sure. Yeah, I saw something about TikTok. Yeah.
Oh, I must actually read that. Well, that's super interesting that actually comes up, because so TikTok's whole premise as a social media platform is that creators make videos to songs, and they lip sync and they sort of do dances to different songs. So with that, and from what I've seen this year, there's been a whole bunch of songs that through TikTok and people making videos to them, and just because of the social media platform and because the platform's exploded, there's a whole bunch of, no. So there's a whole bunch of artists, up and coming artists that no one had ever heard of. But what they did was they put their song on TikTok. The song went viral in a trend on TikTok. And now these artists are breaking out through TikTok as a platform.
Yeah.
So I got thinking,
Old Town Road. That was one of the songs.
Lil Nas X, exactly. So what I was thinking with TikTok, with the rise of TikTok, what they could do is, what Spotify could do, they could look at this platform and be like, "Oh, look at all these up and coming young stars that have like had this one huge hit that's gone crazy on TikTok." They could be like, before a record label snaps them up, they could go to them and be like, "Hey, come with us, sign a deal with us, and we'll help you produce and distribute all your music." And then these guys have another massive platform to distribute their music on. So that could be another avenue. Like in my head, I don't know if that can actually happen or if that will happen, but in my head, that just made sense. That made sense to me. The last thing I would add as well is, talking about TikTok and bringing on different artists and also Joe Rogan bringing it back, is the addition of the video platform to Spotify. Hey, Jonty, like I think I spoke to you about this a bit earlier this year, is the fact that when they brought on Joe Rogan, they've now added a proper video, an in-platform video option. So you can watch Joe Rogan as you would on YouTube, on Spotify with video. And to me, that also brings another opportunity where I doubt Spotify is going to go full throttle and try and overthrow YouTube as the next big video platform. But it also gives them another option and potentially more another route to attract more advertisers and just introduce. And maybe it's also more of just like creating a better platform for their users, a more enjoyable process. And Daniel Ek also spoke a lot about how they were experimenting for a long time with video. So I found that very interesting. Jonty, what do you?
Yeah, I've also noticed on the music, they've added kind of the music video portions when you listen to the music, which is quite a nice, it's just it's like a user experience. It just adds a little bit more to the experience.
I saw that was from the record labels, actually. That I think that was like something they worked on with record labels. I heard Daniel Ek was saying that the record labels came to them and they were like, "Oh, can we maybe try and incorporate the music videos of our artists on your platform?" So they came up with the graphics as like you have that cover art sort of thing going, which is also cool. And it's just, the user experience, and it's making, it's just keeping people on the platform and like giving people a really good experience.
And it's another differentiator. Yeah.
Exactly. But Jonty, I think to close off, what I did want to touch on is, from a strategy point of view, is what I really love about Spotify. And maybe you can echo this point, is the fact that they have someone like Daniel Ek at the helm. And I think he is the perfect person to steer this company to become the next media giant. And I honestly think that they can. This is just my opinion. I honestly think that they can find that they found their niche as an audio company. And if they stick to that and they focus on that, they double down on the podcasting, they solve their business model of music streaming and maybe make that profitable. I think with Daniel Ek at the helm, they can honestly become a massive giant, and the main reason why I say this is because he reminds me of Jeff Bezos. You know how Jeff Bezos, like every second word out of his mouth is customer obsessed. Daniel Ek is much the same, as he and even more so in that he says he wants to add value to every single party that he's involved with, or that he does business with. So whether that's a record label or the artist or the end user on the Spotify platform, he doesn't view this game as a zero-sum game, or a one winner, one loser game where he's trying to overthrow, like I was saying earlier, he's trying to overthrow record labels. He's not out to do that. What I got from him and from all the interviews I watched about him is that he's trying to make the music industry a better place, iron out inefficiencies, and get music to everyone, as their slogan goes, and empower creators and give fans the best possible viewing experience.
And do you think that's a genuine comment, or do you think that's just a marketing scam?
I can't tell exactly if it's just like a sort of corporate thing that he's saying to like tick the boxes. But I honestly, it came up so many times in like a lot of the interviews that I did feel he was being genuine, and it makes sense. Like it makes sense from what they've been doing. To me, it makes sense. why, like, it makes sense that they haven't, why they haven't yet brought out their own piece of hardware. And that's also, I was just talking about record labels and the artists and the end users. I'm also talking about Apple and Amazon and all these and PlayStation and all these companies that they work with to partner with, because they've got integrations on the PlayStation, on the Xbox, on all the smart speakers on these platforms. And I just think that, like, it's almost like good karma. Like, I almost want to think of it as good karma by him adding value to every single touch point that his company is involved in. I think that, like, what goes around comes around, and for him, and he's adding value, which brings more value to his platform, right? So
he's not just profit driven.
Yeah. Because if you look at his
capitals or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at his background as well, he is a musician, and he is a technologist. So for him, he made his millions when he was younger as well. Actually, his backstory was that he
sold a tech company for $1 million earlier.
He was
like 23.
And then he retired. After that, he said, "I'm retired and I'm done with life."
Then he was bored.
And Spotify basically was like his passion project. So I don't believe that. Like, I just felt that he was being genuine in what he was saying, and I just think that's why that's a big reason why they can become a monster. If he leaves, then maybe it becomes another story. But yeah, honestly, what do you think about that, Jonty? Do you think it's a media scam, marketing scam?
Look, I'm always skeptical. I would be interested to, I don't know enough about the man. But it could be a marketing play, it could be genuine. And we would, it could be the differentiator, and that's why the user experience is so good, is because this is his passion. This is what he really wants to drive in, is a good customer experience. Which I think like you said, customer first, that's so important for any business. And I think if that's their focus, then that's obviously what's driving them to be successful. And, maybe that's why they've also been more loss making in the past. But yeah, who knows?
But yeah, I agree with you that we're probably a good balance of each other. Whereas, like, I was very bullish on Daniel Ek, where you're a bit skeptical. So I guess it's always good to, like, remain as neutral as possible in whenever you are doing a strategic analysis and look at all points. What's that saying where if you have a point of view, you need to be able to argue the counterpoint better than your opposition. So I think also, obviously, a flaw on my part is that I can't argue why Daniel Ek may fail, or you know what I mean. It's just an example. I know I do that quite often, and maybe a lot of people don't. They don't look at the counterpoint.
Yeah, you got to critique both sides of the story.
Exactly.
Cool.
I think that was a great way to close out. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to our first episode, first strategy sessions episode, where we broke down the strategy of Spotify. I do realize that we were a bit all over the place. We got a bit excited, but I hope you can see the passion that's coming through, because Jonty and I are super interested in doing more of this, and we will probably be coming at you with more episodes like this in the future. Hey, Jonty, I think the strategy sessions could be very cool. Anyway, everyone, till the next Mindshift. See you then.